And yeah, well, it is what it is, I suppose. So they're going to have to, figure out what the dealio is. Will people be able to opt out? Being a conscientious objector, as it were. Don't we have that? For military duty, you can be a conscientious objector and not have to serve the military. I think that's it. So this is he's a. I don't know where it's gonna go for this, but this is what you got. It's Kentucky. Can this type of thing look? As I said last night, this is something that is new territory for the people of this country. We have this mass rebellion against the Supreme Court ruling. This is not something that we've ever dealt with before on this scale when it comes to a Supreme Court ruling. And you could probably have figured out that this was going to happen if the Supreme Court ruled in the way that it did, simply because of how cases are going against Christian business owners who are being targeted by the LGBT community, and forcing their hand to say or deny them service based on their sexual orientation. And they were using this as a bludgeon against the Christian right. And this is nothing different from what Governor Steve Beshear is doing. And he's a governor, and he feels he has to do certain things to uphold the laws of his state, and some of the laws of his state obviously are federal laws. So, but at the same time, a lot of people have said, if you cannot deal with the requirements of the job, you should resign. So, and I said that, well, okay, that's a two-way street. If gays cannot fulfill the requirements of some jobs for Christian types of jobs, and they should not either go for the job, or if they have it, they should resign. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You can't have it both ways, and I know that they're trying, but you just can't. But the governor later released a statement saying he advised Davis that he respects his personal beliefs, but he took an oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled last month that the Constitution requires government officials in Kentucky and elsewhere to recognize same-sex marriages as valid and allow them to take place. Now, Davis said that he was disappointed with the governor and that he would continue to refuse to issue marriage licenses and would not resign. Now, he acknowledged that he is concerned about being sued or being charged with official misconduct, but he has learned to lean on the Lord. So, he's going to, this is, a lot of these people are going to find themselves in some legal trouble. And this type of stuff may end up back in the Supreme Court hands because, religious freedom and stuff like that. And that's where this battle is headed. That's the whole point behind a lot of this stuff. But this also leads to a second important story. Now, this story isn't taking place in the United States right now, but it's something to keep an eye on because we're seeing, as Western Europe often goes, the United States usually follows even after Western Europe realizes they made a mistake and tries to reverse course. The United States, socialism. A lot of European nations have found that socialism is not such a good idea, and they've dismantled at least part of their socialistic type of society, or they're trying to. But here in the United States, so they're trying to move away from socialism, but the United States is still on that path towards socialism. But here's something else for the record books. Now, maybe it's simply because of Game of Thrones, although I it's possible that it's because of Game of Thrones. I'm not going to deny that it's not. simply because of what the subject matter is. The main subject matter is in the Game of Thrones and one of the storylines. But this is a hot air story coming from Germany. German thought leaders are moving to legalize something that is going on in the Game of Thrones, notably incest. I kid you not. Incest could be made legal in Germany following a meeting of the National Ethics Council. Their National Ethics Council. They have called for the legislation of legalization of incest after looking into the case of a brother and sister who had 4 children together. Despite the dangers of children of incestual relationships being born with abnormalities, the committee claims this risk is not high enough to warrant its criminalization. So there, hey, look, you're going to see the call for such a thing here in the United States. Don't doubt me on this, because we're seeing the polygamist coming out of the woodwork ever since the Supreme Court decision on legalizing gay marriage everywhere. And they're saying, well, this pretty much opens the door for all the rest of us alternative lifestyle types of people. So the polygamists have already started to make their move. You're going to start to see incest pedophilia laws challenged in certain cases, especially in states where the age of sexual consent is very vague and ambiguous, especially in some states it's as low as 13 or 14 years old. So there are some states that have a hodgepodge. Now I know here in New Hampshire, there is a hodgepodge of law versus age of consent, and I'm surprised somebody from the LGBT community hasn't taken it to court already on this, and they're probably doing it. And I probably shouldn't mention it because now somebody's going to be listening to this and saying, "Hey, yeah, that's not fair." But here in the state of New Hampshire, you have the age of consent between a straight couple, a boy and a girl, is 16. The age of consent for a lesbian couple, 2 women, 2 girls having sex, is 16. However, the age of consent for 2 guys is 18. So right there's a discriminatory discrepancy. And you have other states that have similar laws. So will they be forcing the age of consent to be forced to be lower, which then in certain cases could eliminate altogether certain pedophilia laws? So if you have an age of consent that is normalized at the age of 16, well, it's somebody who's 25 or 30 could probably now legally have sex with a 16-year-old. Look, this is where this stuff is going, folks. I'm telling you, when you have somebody who is in government who is now starting to say, well, incest shouldn't be illegal. I mean, are you out of your freaking mind here? And look, this is from Germany, so it's not like it's some rogue nation or something. This is Germany. Now, the story goes on to say the council studied the case of Patrick Stubing. I guess like Meryl Stubing from Love Boat, but Patrick Stubing, who was adopted shortly after birth, but in his 20s met his biological sister and wound up being in a relationship with her. The siblings had 4 children, and Stubing wound up doing 3 years in prison for it. Now, I don't know how you end up having 4 kids and then going to jail. Yeah, but then, well, how do you? But you only do 3 years. So, but you have 4 kids. Well, it's not like they can just all of a sudden get rid of the kids. Why didn't the mom, the sister, get penalized for this? that kind of stuff is going to be brought into question here in these United States. Don't doubt me on this. This stuff is coming, folks. It is now that we have opened the door for it. It is going to come. It's like somebody turning on the spigot on full, and now that little drip is now Niagara Falls. It's going to come full bore. Full bore. And you're not going to be able... I know people are going to say, well, we'll just have to stop it. Well, it's not that simple. When you get momentum like this, and you start using the courts and you start saying, well, hey, if this is legal, then this has to be legal, because what's the difference, really? And they'll start justifying this stuff. Trust me, they'll start justifying it. Now, I don't know how you can justify incest, really. But they're trying to justify it in Germany. In saying, well, why would you want to put these children's father in jail for loving their mother, even if their mother is his sister? I don't. Yeah, well, in additional interviews, a German ethics council has determined that the legislature is no place for deciding on taboos, and in fact, incest may be a fundamental... let me repeat that. Incest may be a fundamental right. Now, believe it or not, this is what NAMBLA has tried to argue. Well, this is a fundamental right to love who we want to love, right? Isn't it all about you shouldn't be able to dictate who you love, because love is love. That's what the LGBT said. Love is love. So who are you to tell us who we fall in love? We can't hope if we fall in for a guy we fall in love with another guy. For a woman we fall in love with another woman. Love is love. So if that is the case, then isn't incest if love is a fundamental right, isn't incest a fundamental right by that standard? Well, it's hard to argue and say, no, it's not, from those on the left, without them being fully exposed at the hypocrites that they really are. But how are they going to deny somebody when they were just in that boat? Now, according to the German Ethics Council, criminal law is not the appropriate means to preserve a social taboo. I don't know how else you enforce a social taboo, but the German Ethics Council says that the fundamental right of adult siblings to sexual self-determination is to be weighed more heavily than the abstract idea of protection of the family. So now, protection of the family, the whole idea of the family, is an abstract idea according to the German Ethics Council. And look, these liberal whack jobs are not far removed from American liberal whack jobs. And if you think this is not going to jump the pond and come here, you've got another thing coming. Because you need to gird your loins that this is going to appear here in these United States. You're going to start seeing court cases for a lot of this alternative deviancy to become legalized mainstream and to be forced upon us as a norm, as the norm. No, it's not the norm. Yes, I agree. A lot of this, this other alternative stuff outside of the LGBT thing is gross and disgusting and abhorrent. Incest is abhorrent. Pedophilia is abhorrent. Polygamy is abhorrent. But hey, after the Supreme Court ruling, they may have they may be right in what they're standing for.